Well, this morning an application was made at the Royal Court to have a recount in the election District 1. At 2:30 the judgment was made. 3 o'clock the recount took place. You're Nick the Corner, you've been at the recount. What did you make of it?
Well, it showed the integrity of the count, in fact. I'm surprised there actually weren't some errors. It turned out, in fact, there weren't, and I'm reassured by that. Certainly when I was there at the count, I wasn't terribly happy with what was going on, but it wasn't enough to make a complaint, of course. But I'm glad now that everything does tally. The final tally is being done at the moment, so that all the numbers are being crunched through the computer, so we will see everything line up and hopefully satisfactory, so no change.
As part of obviously the application was brought by Deputy Leclerc, but a number of former candidates were brought in, appeared as witnesses. You submitted affidavits and spoke with the court, so you were involved. A number of defects in the system have been brought to light as a result of this little inquiry.
Well, I think the defects of what I perceived myself is about the need for competent adjoint, and that they need to do their job in a very thorough way and take it quite seriously. And I was seeing people who really weren't up to the job. That's what I would say would come out of it. There were a number of other issues which weren't addressed by the court, and that was particularly the way voters were influenced at the pre-poll to vote for more candidates than they would have otherwise have wished to, and in elections, namely the senators, which they knew nothing about, which I've mentioned before, essentially working class, first-time voters, confused by the system, because we know voting is an administrative act carried out in a situation of subservience or subordination.
A very long pre-poll period. A lot of candidates hadn't got round to meet people before they were actually voting. Is that a desirable?
Well, it's hard to say. Yes, clearly some people were pre-polled and knew without the candidates being able to get there, and I think particularly of one old people's home, where I turned up about 1 hour after they'd already been pre-polled, and I was a bit miffed by that, and but there's nothing I could do about it.
The Attorney General today picked upon a couple of issues. One of the issues he picked up on was the fact that at the end of the election, on the night before the result was announced, there wasn't the opportunity for the candidates to hear what that result might be, so they could have appealed, asked for a recount at that point.
Well, it's been obviously recognised, and one or two of the candidates actually wanted this to be done. The Attorney General, I think himself, referred to it. It's the English method. Here we are again, the English method, tried and tested, and they know it works. It's what is required is that the jurat autorise announces to the candidates privately, in advance of the official notification, what the results are, so that if there is any dispute, if it's very close, the opportunity exists for the candidates to call for a recount. And Deputy Paul Leclerc, in these circumstances, was saying, had that happened, he would probably, possibly have called for a recount. He would have had the presence of mind to think about it. But as it turned out, where this is the Jersey way, it was just announced to the media, and it came as a shock to everyone, with, in fact, Deputy Judy Martin sort of almost collapsing, partly in shock.
It seems that as a result of this case being brought, it's now revealed that an appeal for a recount could be made up to 12 months after the election, which could be a bit embarrassing.
Well, there have to be grounds. There is no automatic right for a candidate or for another party to go to the court and ask for a recount. It's only if the court so considers that there are grounds for doing so. In this particular case, and we haven't seen their judgment yet, they obviously considered there was sufficient concern, and I think that was primarily based upon my affidavit of what I'd seen. If there's one lesson for candidates here, and they do not take it seriously in Jersey, be there at the count or present your representatives, and then there's no question of any dispute. don't be naive. There's an old Irish saying, it's maybe rather cynical wisdom. It's not who does the voting, it's who does the counting.
There were other aspects which were revealed during the course of this election, and asked a week ago, the constable, I think it's Galachon, confirmed some of your fears about aspects of the lack of information at the voting polls to tell people you don't have to vote for 4 candidates in the senatorial or 3 candidates or however many. These are your options, you may if you wish. Not made entirely clear, and that was something that was flagged up after the election, but you'd in fact flagged it up before the election.
I had indeed, and it wasn't taken seriously at the time, and I became very annoyed by it. And I could even see it actually going on in the poll on the day. The staff were still saying to people, you can vote for up to 4, you can vote for up to 3, and there were people saying, oh, do I have to vote for 3, do I have to vote for 4? And the public is confused by that.
This was Jersey's first so-called general election. It wasn't quite a general election. There could have been scope, there could have been much more confusion, there could have been scope for some outside observers. Would you think it would have been warranted?
Perhaps I personally did try and contact some external bodies, but had no reply from them. They didn't seem to be expressed any interest in it.
If there had been more contested constables' elections, it would have been even more complicated, of course.
It would indeed, yes.
Our friend sitting here, Emil, was very campaigned for years for an all-island vote. He wanted to vote for everybody. Obviously, that's not been achieved. What's your view on that? Do you think that's achievable for Emil's sake?
Well, if there were political parties, then it would be possible. I think that's probably what he had in mind. Then he'd be able to vote for the party that would represent the entire island. I think we have to overcome this kind of simple parochialism. It's terrible. We've got to think about island-wide issues because we're in serious times.
Emil would have voted. This is probably the first election he's missed for many, many years. Do you think there's any hope for the future? People might turn out in greater numbers?
Well, we had a better turnout this time, so that's good. Something did that, and I think that's the changing economic situation. In 3 years' time, it will undoubtedly be much worse, and maybe that will wake people up, the electorate. They've got to get out there. If they want to determine their government, they're going to have to get out and vote. And also, a bit more than that, it's not just about voting every 3 years. That's not what democracy is about. It's about engagement in the whole process of deciding the direction of the world, society.
See you again in 3 years.
Thank you very much. I'll be back.